Picture an ordinary September morning, a hot Brazilian city. People rushing about their day, children playing in the streets. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. And somewhere inside an abandoned building, a machine stands alone, covered in dust, forgotten by everyone, locked behind iron doors. Nobody knows that inside this machine sits a substance capable of killing anyone who touches it. A substance so dangerous that even 300 years after its burial, the ground surrounding it will still be poisoned. But the people who are about to find it don't know that. They don't know anything about radiation at all. And it is precisely that ignorance that killed them. September 13th, 1987, the city of Goiânia, Brazil. This is one of the most terrifying nuclear disasters in human history. A disaster caused not by war, not by a power plant failure, but by human ignorance and someone else's irresponsibility. It all began in 1977, when a private cancer clinic in Goiânia purchased a radiotherapy machine. Inside this machine was a cylinder of cesium-137, a radioactive isotope used to target and destroy cancerous tumors. The machine worked. Doctors treated patients. Everything was under control, as long as trained staff were present. In 1985, the clinic relocated to a new building, but the machine, the one containing the cesium, was left behind. Simply abandoned, without notifying any regulatory authority, without a security guard, without warning signs, without any safety measures whatsoever. Someone assumed it would be fine. Someone thought someone else would take care of it. Someone simply didn't want to deal with the paperwork. Nobody took care of it. 2 years. For 2 full years, one of the most dangerous radioactive sources on the planet sat inside an abandoned building in the middle of a Brazilian city, completely unsecured, accessible to anyone. This was not a coincidence. This was a disaster that had been building for 2 years. On September 13th, 1987, 2 men broke into the abandoned clinic. They were looking for scrap metal, anything valuable, iron, copper, parts that could be sold. They were not criminals in the traditional sense. They were poor men trying to make a living. The machine looked valuable. They loaded the parts onto a wheelbarrow and took them home. That same night, both men felt sick, nausea, vomiting. Their hands began to swell. They assumed it was something they ate. They continued dismantling the machine. 5 days, each day bringing a higher dose of radiation, each day causing deeper damage inside their bodies, damage they couldn't see, couldn't feel, and couldn't understand. On September 18th, they sold what remained of the device to Devar Alves Ferreira. He broke open the iridium window of the inner capsule, and inside, he saw something that took his breath away. A blue light. Extraordinary. Pulsing. A deep, celestial blue glow. As if someone had placed a fragment of a star inside a steel cylinder. Devar was not frightened. He was enchanted. He had never heard of cesium-137. He had no idea what radiation was. The school where he studied never covered it. Nobody in his world knew that substances existed which could kill invisibly. He collected some of the powder and brought it home. "Look how beautiful this is," he said to his wife. She agreed. They placed it on display in their living room, like a decoration. Neighbors arrived, relatives, friends. People touched the powder with bare hands. Some took pieces home as gifts. Devar's brother Ivo took some home. On September 24th, his 6-year-old daughter, Leda das Neves, found it. She rubbed it onto her hands, her face, her body. She laughed and showed her mother how she was glowing. Then she sat down and ate her lunch, with hands covered in radioactive powder. Her mother was sitting right beside her. She didn't know. The neighbors were next door. They didn't know. Thousands of people were walking through the city. They didn't know. Meanwhile, cesium-137 had already spread to at least 9 locations across the city, carried on shoes, on clothing, on hands. Invisible, odorless, silent. Just death, quietly spreading through a city that had no idea. Days passed. People began losing their hair. Skin swelled and turned dark. Wounds appeared that refused to heal. People were vomiting blood. Nobody understood what was happening. Doctors diagnosed food poisoning, allergies, an unidentified infection. Nobody thought of radiation, because nobody could imagine something like this was possible in the middle of an ordinary city. On September 28th, 15 days after the machine was stolen, De Vere's wife, Maria Gabriela Ferreira, finally made the connection. She was already gravely ill. Her hair was falling out. Her body ached everywhere. And yet, she gathered what remained of the material, placed it in a bag, and took it to the public health office in a taxi. Think about that moment. A dying woman, already severely irradiated, found the strength to save hundreds of strangers. The government declared a full radiological emergency. The Olympic Stadium became a decontamination center. 112,800 people were tested. 249 had external contamination. At least 129 had internal contamination. But for 4 people, any help had already come too late. Days passed. People began losing their hair. Skin swelled and turned dark. Wounds appeared that refused to heal. People were vomiting blood. Nobody understood what was happening. Doctors diagnosed food poisoning, allergies, an unidentified infection. Nobody thought of radiation, because nobody could imagine something like this was possible in the middle of an ordinary city. On September 28th, 15 days after the machine was stolen, De Vere's wife, Maria Gabriela Ferreira, finally made the connection. She was already gravely ill. Her hair was falling out. Her body ached everywhere. And yet, she gathered what remained of the material, placed it in a bag, and took it to the public health office in a taxi. Think about that moment. A dying woman, already severely irradiated, found the strength to save hundreds of strangers. The government declared a full radiological emergency. The Olympic Stadium became a decontamination center. 112,800 people were tested. 249 had external contamination. At least 129 had internal contamination. But for 4 people, any help had already come too late. The first to die was Lady das Neves Ferreira, a 6-year-old girl who thought she was playing with glitter. She died on October 23, 1987. She was buried in a lead-lined coffin encased in concrete. Even in death, her body remained too dangerous for a normal burial. Maria Gabriela Ferreira, the woman who saved the city, died the same day. She was 37 years old. 2 young men from the scrapyard followed shortly after. The cleanup took months. Several houses were demolished entirely. The land where the radioactive waste is buried cannot be used by human beings for another 300 years. De Vere Ferreira himself survived. Despite absorbing 7 gray of radiation, a dose considered fatal for most people, his body held on. But surviving physically did not mean surviving as a person. He knew that his curiosity had killed his niece, that because of him, the woman who tried to save the city had died, that because of him, neighbors, friends, and strangers had fallen ill. De Vere Ferreira died in 1994 from liver cirrhosis brought on by severe depression and alcoholism. He was barely in his 40s. Ivo Ferreira, Lade's father, lived longer, but he never forgave himself. He died in 2003 from emphysema, having battled depression for the rest of his life. The 2 scavengers who first took the machine, they survived, but only after the partial amputation of their limbs. And here is perhaps the most painful detail of all. Due to the inadequacy of Brazilian law at the time, not a single person responsible for this disaster received a real prison sentence. Not the clinic management that abandoned a lethal device without security. Not the officials who ignored violations for years. Nobody. 4 people dead, over 250 irradiated, and not one conviction. After the disaster became public, the people of Goiânia faced discrimination across the entire country. Employers refused to hire them. Hotels turned them away. Airlines wouldn't let them board. People avoided any physical contact, even a handshake, as if radiation could pass through the air between 2 people in the same room. Those who survived one catastrophe found themselves at the center of another. Invisible, social, and in many ways, just as devastating. During decontamination, authorities found contamination in 3 buses, 14 cars, and 42 homes. A total of 4,000 tons of radioactive waste was collected and buried outside the city. 4,000 tons. From one small cylinder of blue powder. The Goiânia disaster is not a story about evil people. There was no deliberate crime here. This is a story about what happens when dangerous substances are left unguarded. When bureaucrats sign documents without thinking about consequences. When a system fails to teach ordinary people how to recognize danger. Roberto and Wagner didn't know what cesium was. De Vere didn't know what radiation was. Leda was simply a child. They all did exactly what any uninformed person would have done in their place. The real responsibility lies with those who left a lethal machine unsecured for 2 years, with those who never reported it, with the system that never saw fit to explain to ordinary people that some things must never be touched. After Goiânia, the International Atomic Energy Agency introduced new global safety regulations. Brazil made the licensing and tracking of every radioactive device a legal requirement. But none of that brought back 4 people. The blue powder that a child played with. It glowed so beautifully. Subscribe to Ages Ago, because history is full of warnings that humanity still hasn't learned to hear.